Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unit 6, Day 2. And today we're going to be talking about capital and labor during this time. Basically, it's going to be the start of the Gilded Age is what you are going to see, and how the United States was rapidly changing in regards to business and what that looked like. Now, you'll notice on the slides, I start with giving you some pictures of some people, some entrepreneurs, some athletes, and some other people. And generally in class, I would talk about these and say, who are these people? How did they make their money? How do you feel about that? And the reason that I bring that up is because this is going to be an era where you're going to see a large amount of people who become wealthy very, very quickly. And a lot of them, they do it in very different ways. Some of them start out without having many advantages and are able through hard work to become wealthy. Some of them, in the case of JP Morgan, came from a wealthy family and was able just to increase and build on that wealth. But it is because of those stories of people, basically rags to riches type story, that you're going to see a lot of people during this time start attaining to this idea of, hey, I can become wealthy very quickly overnight. And if I am wealthy, that says something about me as a person and kind of implies that I'm somewhat of a better person than other people. And that came from the theory of social Darwinism, the idea of survival of the fittest should be applied to people in society. You also have the idea of the gospel of wealth, where you're taking and combining biblical principles with the idea of wealth together to come up with this idea of what does it mean to be wealthy and what does that look like. So during this time, again, you're going to have the growth of a lot of wealthy people and the growth of a lot of business. Now, we're going to spend a large amount of time in today's slides talking about railroads, because railroads is going to be what drives a lot of this at the beginning. A lot of people get into railroads and are railroad investors, railroad speculators, and the government would actually assist the railroads in helping build up and grow the country. And the reason we focus so much on the railroads is because on the backs of the railroads, that is what allows a lot of the U.S. growth. Because now you could produce something in, you could have cattle in Nevada and Texas and New Mexico and ship that to Chicago, where it would be processed in a stockyard and then sent out to the rest of the country. So the railroads would really drive a lot of what was happening in the United States. The same with oil production that you're going to see with John D. Rockefeller. The railroads are going to be behind that and help facilitate a lot of that growth during this time. So railroads are going to be very important. You also see, I've already mentioned the gospel of wealth, social Darwinism, the idea of laissez-faire, which means hands-off applied to the government, and where the government during this time, as I mentioned in the welcome video, you're going to see a period where presidents weren't really effective very much, that it was Congress that kind of took the lead. And you're going to see Congress, for the large part, and even the Supreme Court, kind of just tries to stay out of business issues and let business operate in whatever way it wants. Now, we're going to see that it's eventually going to lead to a period known as the progressive movement, which the progressive movement will be a direct assault on that whole idea of government should stay out of business. It's going to be the exact opposite, that government should be very involved in business. So, yeah, you're going to see the government, this idea of laissez-faire, and the government staying out of what was going on during this time. Now, with the growth of big business, you're going to start to see monopolies become a thing, John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil. You're also going to see oligopolies become a thing, where you have a business dominated by just a few companies. When we talk about oligopolies, I have a picture of it on the slide that shows cell phone companies today. And most likely, most of you in this class, if you have a cell phone, it's probably an AT&T or a Verizon phone or a Sprint phone. But really, AT&T and Verizon are the two big cell phone companies, and I like to liken them to an oligopoly, because even if you have another company, so say a US Cellular or something like that, a lot of times they're going to be using AT&T or Verizon towers. So it just shows the power of those few companies. So with this, again, you're going to have the growth of these businesses, and you're also going to have businesses looking how to be more productive during this. And that's why we're going to end out today's slides talking about scientific management and Taylorism. I find this fascinating because of how they went about doing this. And basically, Frederick Winslow Taylor he looked at production and said, look, we can increase the speed of production and make a lot more of whatever we want to make by doing a couple things. One of them, removing brain work from simple production work. So basically that person working on a production line, they shouldn't have to do much thinking to do what they are doing. And also looking at how we can speed up production in other ways. So Frederick Winslow Taylor famously, he would take his stopwatch and he would have someone, so let's say he's in a factory where somebody is shoveling coal. He would have them do it one way and time them, and then have them do it another way and time them. And through these time study and scientific management, as it was known, he was able to increase production and make production go a lot faster. Henry Ford would use these same principles in producing car. With later on, a little bit after this era, you're going to see with the Model T coming out, he would do the same thing in his factories. He would time the way it took something, and he was constantly focused on how can I increase production time? How can I make things work faster? You're also going to see during this time the creation of the idea of vertical integration of a company, which basically vertical integration of a company is where a company, instead of outsourcing some things in their production, what they're going to do is try to handle all that in-house. So a great example of that, which would come a little bit after this period that we are talking about, would be the Ford Motor Company and the Ford Rouge facility in Dearborn, Michigan. That facility is still in production today, are still producing today. They actually produce the Ford F-150. But there you're going to see Henry Ford take this idea of vertical integration and really apply it to auto manufacturing, where he was producing his own glass, producing his own rubber for tires, and so on and so forth. So this idea of a company handling everything on their own. You'll also see John D. Rockefeller during this time with oil. He's going to start to realize once he starts having conflicts with railroad companies, he says, hey, I can build oil pipelines then and handle shipping oil to all of these different places and get rid of the middleman for him, which would be the railroad in this instance. So you see, again, a time of rapid changes within the industry. Now, on the other side of this, which we'll get to more on tomorrow, you're going to see that a lot of this is going to be met with workers, and they aren't going to be very happy with it. I keep using the example of Ford because, well, first of all, I know a lot about Ford Motor Company, but second of all, you're going to see a lot of this, like these ideas are really show up in his factories. Henry Ford would later go on to offer a $5 a day workday, which back then, that was big money. Part of the reason he did it, though, is because he had such issues keeping people working on the production lines. Because if you've ever worked in a production line, it is very, very boring work. It's very tedious. And it was hard for Henry Ford, and I'm sure plenty of others, to keep people working there. And a lot of those needs would actually be met by immigrants who would come in who wouldn't have a problem with working that, whereas some Americans might have a problem with doing that. So production, again, changing a lot. Business is changing a lot during this time. And again, really, it's going to be building up to the next period that we're in, where you're going to see kind of a strike back towards labor and people saying, hey, we don't really like Taylorism. We don't really like scientific management. We don't like how we're being worked like this. And we want something different for that. So again, if you have any questions with anything, please let me know. Today, you got a couple of different assignments to do. One of those is actually going to have you looking at how the government during this time helped out railroads, and compare and contrast that with how the government has helped out businesses over recent history, and kind of evaluate that and express your own thoughts about that, about what is the government's role in helping business, and what should that look like, or maybe it shouldn't look like anything to you. So I hope you have a great day. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop by.